get at the end of the day at somebody's mum and nan, but it was just chaos over here. It just a lot of rubbish about. I don't know what it stands for anymore.
What was funny about the Queen dying is people turning into throat goats, lining up to like pay homage, like. You know, it's like
my dad queued. My dad and my stepmom did, and I mean it's each to their own. But I mean, queuing for 12 hours to see a box, it's yeah, I don't know. It's
queuing for landlords, queuing for glorified landlords. Yeah. That's all they are, right? They own the fucking land. They have no power. They're just landlords. You know, so why anybody would queue for them is like, do you queue for your life? If your landlord died. My landlord died, I'd throw a fucking party. If Cody's landlord died, he'd fucking pop a bottle, right?
Yeah,
fuck these people. Anyway, oh, good. Neda's here. Excellent. All right, so let's get down to brass tacks. Obviously, I'm Sebastian Weiss of Outcast Press. Cody?
Yeah, I'm Cody Sexton of Anxiety Press.
All right, and we are thrilled today to have Neda, Steve, and James. Now, where the fuck is Austin? He's not here, but that's all right. If we have three people, that's fine.
Yeah, that'll work.
We'll figure something out. He's busy. He does a lot of, to be fair, he does a lot of like activism on the streets for, so he's busy, right? Like, yeah.
Well, hey, as a representative of a commercial landlord who often goes out Saturday and kicks people out of their places, I still made time, you know. I'm just kidding. I used to do that. I don't do it anymore. When we were picking on the landlords there a while ago, I thought I had to bring that up.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a good friend. One of my best friends is a landlord. And I say, bro, I respect you as a person. But you, qua landlord, are a piece of shit. And he goes, I know. He's very self-aware. Like, I'll respect him, but like in his capacity as a landlord, yeah.
I don't mind saying the company that I worked for, and who weren't inhumane or anything in any way, but the amount of money that we made, and that's why when the revolution comes, you know, the bankers and landlords are first up against the wall. Like, you know, it was not, it's not wrong to make some money, but it was, and I'm not a communist, but it was excessive, you know. It was, you know, and again, we were certainly not the most corporate of landlords, that's for sure. I worked for a very small company. But yeah, that's all the landlord.
Yeah. All right, so let's get down to deciding who should. Huh? Oh, sorry, James.
No, I was just saying, anything like that when exploit people, it's going to happen, and then that's normally going to be owned by the people that make the rules and the powers anyway. So I mean, like, it's a typical thing over here with private landlords at the moment. But like I say, you've got so many people that are on high incomes make the decisions that have their fingers in the pie, so it's not going to go anywhere, unfortunately.
I don't know about that. I mean, when a system is so entrenched, people think that it can't change, right? So like there's a really stupid book called by Mark Fisher called Capitalist Realism. And he says, oh, we can't even think of a world outside of capitalism, right? And it's like, yeah, well, that was the South during slavery. They couldn't conceptualize a world outside of slavery. Yet we don't have traditional slavery like we do, right? You can make the same argument. The Spartans could make the same argument. Any regime that has been entrenched can make the same argument that Mark Fisher makes about, oh, we can't even imagine a world. Well, what are you talking about? Do you think that that there are no communists anymore? Cody's a socialist. I'm a fucking anarchist. We can imagine it. right? So that's why it's like, any system can be overturned, right? And it's sort of defeatist to just say, oh, well, it's so entrenched. Yeah, so was slavery in the South. Very entrenched. It was part of their ethics, right? And so, plus,
I think I'm still a bit. So I'm still a bit sore, really, that we had the chance to go down that route. And with Jeremy Corbyn, it was we were in a position there where we had someone who was going to shake the apple cart, socialist as well. Would have improved things for the better. I've absolutely no doubt about it from the last years that we've had under the Tory government, where it's just got worse. But unfortunately, what's happened there is all the buddies of the elite own the tabloids, own the press, and completely trashed him, turned him into something he clearly he wasn't. And it feels a little bit defeatist over here at the moment. But I don't know, you guys have got your problems too. But it's it does feel a little bit like, what can you do now?
We're going through a big election here, right where I live in Canada, provincial election, and it's very stark. It's a socialist party versus a right-wing Canadian party that seems to get its policies from Fox News and the Kentucky School of Economics, property supremacists. So, and that election's Monday. So I'm predicting a socialist victory, but my bias is probably lean in that direction.
Yeah.
Workers' paradise in Alberta. You can all move anytime you want. It's only 40 below part of the year.
I grew up north. I like it. I mean, I have Nordic blood in me. I'm from Minnesota, so I know.
Yep.
I know fucking 50 below weather. Although I don't know if it's like that now because of climate change, but yeah, I like it. I like the colder climates. I hate I live more down south now, and the heat, I don't like that as much, but
I can handle a couple of days of anything minus 30. Minus 40 is where the two scales cross, right? Fahrenheit and centigrade. And I can handle a few days of minus 30, but only a couple. And minus 40 is unpleasant. We actually have quite warm summers in that. I always tell people I live in the warm part of Canada. We have cactus.
Yeah. Oh, good. Austin's joining us. Good. Maybe. Okay. All right. So yeah, we should probably get started so that we don't drone on and on about bullshit that listeners may or may not want to hear. But yeah, so Cody and I are in the stages of finalizing mirrors reflecting shadows. Mm-hmm. And I gotta say, we had a hell of a turnout, right, Cody? We had like over 650 pieces. And I mean, again, shout out to the RF ladies for sifting through all of them and selecting them, because that's a monumental task. I can only speak for Outcast, but when we've done anthology calls, we've gotten 100, 200, and that was an undertaking. But I mean, we just got slammed for the Trevor Project one. So yeah, we're finishing up that. And Cody, correct me if I'm wrong, you're thinking kind of mid-June, end of June, when it should drop. And yeah, it's really good. It's a nice smattering of genres, and yeah, can't wait for that. But without further ado, let us decide. So like here, what we did last time. So we decided who was the order, and then we did the reading, and then everybody else put their mics on mute so that there wasn't any interference. Afterwards, we did, any kind of Q&A if there was a Q&A. And then we just moved on. So about 15 minutes each. So who wants to go first, second, third, and fourth?
I'll go third.
Okay,
Second.
Steve is third. You got third covered.
Can it be second?
Yeah. Okay, so Neda's second. Nah, James, Neda already called second.
Yeah.
So now it's between Austin and James.
I think I might have been
first
last.
and last.
But,
Sorry.
Hello, everyone, by the way. Hi.
Hey, Austin.
that's all
I'm
right.
good for any order. Just happy to
Done.
be here with everyone. Yeah.
All right, James, what do you want, first or last, bro?
Right, do you want to do a scissor?
Huh?
You guys say, and I'll go.
Go first.
You pick, and I'll go.
All right, Austin, do you want to open?
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. All right, this is Austin, and guys, I'm telling you, this is I got to talk up Austin just because of the amazing fucking work he does in Arizona with the homeless population. It's just unbelievable. And you're what, 22, right?
23 now. Yeah.
23 now. Yeah, 23. And yeah, it's just one of the highest honors to work with Austin. But anyway, yeah, I'll shut my mouth. All right, Austin, you got some poems for us. Is this from Compulsive Swim?
Yeah. I thought I'd read a couple from Compulsive Swim, maybe a few from Lotus, and
Okay.
got a couple new ones that I'm working on.
Yeah, whatever you got. So 15 minutes roughly is yours, bro. All right, I'm going to mute my mic, and then it's all, wait, there's some chat stuff here. Oh, it's just, okay.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, my friend. Love working with you as well, and very happy to be here with everyone. Got high respect for each and every one of you. So, yeah. Well, my latest book is with Outcast and Sebastian, and it is Compulsive Swim, and it's another poetry novella, kind of like Lotus. Last couple of years, I've kind of fallen in love with the poetry novella as a genre. Just kind of the idea that this, collection of poems can be read poem by poem and, still be cohesive, but also front to back and hopefully tell this non-linear weird story. So the first one I'm going to read, I'll just start off with the first couple poems. This is the prelude to Act 1 in Compulsive Swim. I tell you everything. Shower thoughts to sex dreams, but I do have one secret. I hate being sober. I don't like a clear head. When we broke up in college, I took vodka shots for a few weeks. I shot ice for a couple months. I smoked pills until I woke up in the hospital. You went to bed early last night, so I walked to QT to buy dollar spirits, but I kept walking, right past the store, under the overpass, to Van Buren and 52nd. I bought a pill, blue as the ocean, and thought about how we can always drown, no matter how shallow the water is. So yeah, that's the prelude to Act 1. One thing that we're really struggling with here in Arizona is the fentanyl crisis, and in doing my work on the streets, I've had a lot of friends die from the blues. I just reversed an overdose yesterday, so it's just like commonplace to always have Narcan with you. Like I have Narcan with me right now. And it's tough, when your friends are dying. So this next poem, this is the first poem from Act 1 of Compulsive Swim. This morning I'm watered down, a flower who OD'd on rain. You say it's okay if we never stand up again. It's okay if we don't move too far from the soil, if we melt into this queen-size grave before the sun crawls close. The ocean is old, and the sun is a baby, a newborn in diapers with eyes so dark and blue you could fall right in. This city of ours is dying. Eggs break on frying pans. We spoke Lucky Strikes at the dining room table, and none of us can control a single thing. I love you, and I hate myself, but more so I hate these rituals that move my body and send words to my tongue. I complete these compulsions, and they feel like hitting the pipe without the high, like screwing off the top of my head and letting God piss on my brain in hopes that for once the bad thoughts will smoke off the silence. All anyone ever wants is peace. It makes sense then why I always end up knocking on the table in the special way I do. Once, then twice. Once, then twice we miss a meal, then a couple bills. Then a bullet cuts through the cold night, down our street, past the stolen bike, past the dope deal, through our bedroom window. Fuck. I hope we make it to wine and pills, to wine and medicine, to passing out with the lamp still on, to warming our hands by touching each other. That was one of the first poems that I wrote for this book, and I think I sent it to Sebastian a while back, and it was like, yeah, there's something there. Let's do something with that, you know. I have OCD, and it's always been very, very difficult for me just to function as a normal human, get through day-to-day shit. And this book really talks about that a lot. Like right now, currently, I'm in OCD treatment again, and I haven't had to do treatment since I was a kid, and it's the fucking worst. It's literally just like a bunch of doctors showing you all your fears, and you just have to like fucking sit there and like feel bad. So, been writing a lot of poems lately, so I'll send those over to you, Sebastian. This next poem I'm going to read is specifically about the anxiety, the OCD. It's a poem that I wrote right after I had a panic attack. If I can pull it up. This is in Act 2. It's the third poem. My mom's gonna die. I cried tonight in the bathroom on the tile. I'm dripping wet. I can't stop these ticks in my neck. There's an itch on my brain, and the water's not hot enough. I'm dirty and can't get clean. I mean, hospitals are colder in the desert. I mean, I think my dad's gonna pull us back and never sit back up. I think I'm drunk, like blackout drunk, like I feel too much. God, I hate the word much. It's the sound the man at the bar stool to my left made before falling to his right. It's the noise that left your throat when you overdosed. Grape juice skin. You didn't wince after the first shot of Narcan. Shit. I don't know. I feel too low. Fuck, lo and behold, where do we go if we die alone? Because I'm alone. And I gotta call my mom. It's way too late, but I know she'd pick up. Because her greatest fear is a cop on the other line calling from a wreck. Fuck, I'm a wreck. I can't breathe because, oh God, I think they're dead. I know they're dead. Do you think we'll know? Do you think we'll know, babe? Do you think we'll know when the day arrives where we can't get out of bed? It's a fun little panic attack poem. This next one is a poem that I wrote about a family on the street. I work a lot with various demographics of the homeless population, but one that's really striking and prevalent right now in Arizona are the single moms with kids, for example. You know, like every week I probably get 10 calls from families on the street, and most of those are just single moms with kids. And oftentimes it overlaps with domestic violence and all sorts of stuff, you know. So this is a poem about a specific family that they're housed now, but they were, I got really close to them while they were on the streets. Layla and her kids sleep on a bridge that frowns over the freeway. Wrapped in blankets on a yellow slab of foam, the baby is silent despite the sirens. Cars whiz by below us, and I pass Layla a smoke. So many people are off to house parties and hookups. shitty horror movies and football games, her son Jace says. He spits off the guardrail the city put around the bridge to stop people from jumping. It lands on a windshield, and he laughs, and I laugh, and I smoke, and he doesn't. The car lessens to light, and I pretend I don't hear Jace when he asks if joy is a currency we should spend all at once, since we're bound to be robbed of it one of these nights. How's my time looking? Got a couple more?
Yeah, I mean, maybe like one or two more, depending on length, or you can stop whenever you want. So we're not like huge sticklers on.
Yeah.
It has to be exactly 15 minutes. So yeah, I mean, yeah, do like one or two more, bro. Yeah, and then we'll talk and then move on. So keep on going. This is fucking great.
Sweet. Yeah, I just looked at the time and I totally forgot what time I hopped on. Obviously late, as I often do. I just had no idea. So yeah, well, I appreciate you guys having me here. So this is probably the newest poem that I wrote. And I wrote it when I took a friend to the DMV to get her ID, and shit got real. So, yeah. This is a poem called Standing with Kelly at the DMV. Like most of my friends on the streets, she's either robbed of her identity or locked up without it every month or so. And so we renew, I think to myself. Maybe Vonnegut would have said something similar about death if he'd been born in the 2000s, if he smoked pills instead of taking them, if he could hit himself with a needle in the dark. The line hasn't moved in minutes, and the double doors we entered from are open at an angle. I look at Kelly, and Kelly looks at me, and I want to tell her that if fentanyl had a face, we'd never see its teeth. Last week, at a picnic table at the park, Carolina's lips purpled and his skin turned gray. We Narcaned him, and he didn't wake up. We Narcaned him, and he didn't wake up. We Narcaned him, and the music from the speaker kept playing, and Mary Jane barked and barked, and Jenna told her to shut the hell up, and Sideshow poured his last water bottle on Carolina's neck, and we Narcaned him, and we Narcaned him. And finally, Carolina's neck twitched. I touched his shoulder, and he coughed himself alive as if he'd been asleep underwater. The line at the DMV is moving, and I tell Kelly I quit drinking this week, and I haven't slept much lately. Kelly says she's hurting. She says that most days she really does want to get clean, but numbness is a company, and on the streets at night, there's nothing on the other side of a clear head but being alone. Kelly hits a tray, sitting on a curb in the parking lot. I hold her paper ID while she burns the pill to resin, keeping the sickness at arm's length for our drive back to camp. A few months back, Kelly's man got locked up for pills. Today, Lupe got picked up by the cops for the 100-pack in her bag, but the dealer in the Cadillac who rolled up to her camp earlier and walked tent to tent with his poison rode away hours ago with the money. It hurts, doesn't it? How much it hurts to just try to hurt a little less. That's the poem, yeah.
All right. So, any questions for Austin?
Questions from my side, but I love your third one. It was from, is it from the compulsive side?
So what was that? Which poem did you say?
It was the third one that you read.
Yeah, the third poem. Yeah, the all the poems except for I think the last one. Those are all from Compulsive Swim. Yeah.
That was
Yeah, I
fantastic.
remember. Yeah, I remember, Austin. You said something when we talked on about a year ago. And see, I was shocked by how young you were, because I think you were like 22, 21 at the time. And I had you pegged as just your level of wisdom. I had you pegged as easily in your 40s, right? Just because, like, I remember you said something to me, which was, said, you never know when somebody's going to die, right? And you said, you told me a story. Fucked me up. You said you were sitting at a bar with some guy. You were just shooting the shit with him, right? And hours later, he got shot. He was dead, right? Just in a blink.
Yeah.
And that's a somewhat regular occurrence for you, isn't it? Like, you've seen
Dude,
people
all the time. Yeah. I mean, like yesterday we were an overdose, that's just part of daily life, here. And then a couple weeks back, one of my friends, his street name was Trouble, he got stabbed in the heart and died under a bridge, We just did the 1 year memorial for our friend Madrox. He drowned in Tempe Town Lake here, and I don't know if anyone saw that story. It went viral, actually. It was in like the New York Times and stuff. It was the guy who drowned in the lake, and the cops watched him drown. So we just did the 1 year memorial for him with his mom, and his mom just called me yesterday. Got to talk to her a little bit. But yeah, I mean, like, I was it was like 2 a.m. last week, and I was outside this family shelter, which definitely not supposed to be there at 2 a.m. But one of my families was in there, and there was a domestic violence thing going on in there. So the mom brought the kids out to the parking lot, and we were just talking and figuring out a plan. And like a couple blocks over, we just heard like a whole clip unload, and I didn't even think about it, and like neither did she. And then we talked about it later, and we were like someone probably died over there, right? And we were like, yeah, it's fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, you get kind of used to it. I mean, I know. I mean, the place where I live, it's not. I'm sure not as bad as you, but yeah, I'll hear gunshots, and I don't even flinch anymore, right? Like, if you were to come over and all of a sudden, like, today, I went and got the mail, and like behind me there was like a gunshot. I heard a gunshot. I didn't flinch. Right? I mean, yeah, I mean, you just get. I don't know. I don't know if numb is the right word. It's just like you're used to it, right? Like 2 years ago, I was outside smoking, and I saw this woman run naked down the street, and she was like, the devil's in me. I didn't flinch. Like, from like quote unquote normal people, they would think, wow, that's fucked up. For me, that's just another fucking day in paradise, as they would say, right? I mean, that's just another fucking day, right? But
yeah,
no.
you get accustomed to a certain level of sorrow, But I think it's also a coping mechanism, if you're in the shit, like, you have to keep going, You just kind of gotta let it become part of the atmosphere around you, I guess, like the wind or the trees,
All right. Any other questions for Austin? I mean, I have tons, but I don't want to take up the time of anybody else. So just to satisfy my own.
It's good to see you, by the way, man. It's good to see you.
It's always great to see you. It's always satisfying talking to you, bro. Really, it's really a high honor. So.
Right back at you. I missed you, man. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else want to ask?
Right. There's obviously a lag, isn't there? Yeah, obviously you're personal, and like obviously, like you're wrong. How do they feel about?
Sorry, you cut out there a bit, brother. What was it?
Your writing's clearly perfect, and obviously you're you're talking about experiences you've been through with other friends, and some of the stuff that's sort of probably outside of the law. Like, how about you that are involved in those stories?
I heard outside of the law and the stories. What was the last part? I'm sorry. For some reason, it's cutting out a little bit.
I think there was some. I think he was trying to say how much are you
the people you're writing about. Yeah, and how do the people you're writing about in those stories, are they happy that you're loose?
Oh, like people that I'm writing poems about? Yeah, you know, like
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, like some poems, you know, aren't 100% autobiographical. It's not journalism, you know. So some poems I pull from different memories, different experiences, create a character. Some poems, it's just the straight people that I hang out with every day. You know, like the last poem that I read, I saw Kelly yesterday. I saw Sideshow yesterday. I saw Carolina yesterday. You know, Lupe's in a sober living now, which is really dope. But I saw her last week. You know, so those are all, you know, real people and real names. But that's the family right there. You know, and like I showed them that poem, and yeah, like people think it's dope. You know, like it's documenting, you know, the real life day-to-day experience, you know. And I don't know, I feel that poetry has a certain power to, you know, exemplify these stories and push them forward. And if someone wants me to write a poem, like I see that as like an honor. You know, if someone wants me to carry that story forward, or even just an experience, you know, and pull something from that experience, I think that's an honor, you know, for sure. Right now I'm working on a song for Trouble, who died a couple weeks ago. His mom and sister reached out, and I talked to them, and I don't know, I just feel that everyone deserves a poem written about them, you know, something to immortalize, you know, the beautiful parts of them, you know. And in that last poem, for example, that was more so about a lot of the systemic issues of the current drug crisis, you know, and how poor people are criminalized for, you know, being sold drugs, you know, and not the people who are making the money off of it. Yeah. But just kind of using those experiences as examples, I guess. Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's. So thank you, Austin.
Thank you.
Neda,
Yeah.
I believe I think you said 2, right? You're going next. Okay.
Yes.
Please. Oh, I hope you're going to read what I think you're going to read. I really do. We talked about it.
It's your fault. It's Sebastian's fault, because I didn't want to read this one. It's quite explicit. And
Yes,
you go
explicit.
to bars, and I'm the only woman here. But it's your fault. Yeah, I didn't want to read this. So it's the first encounter with the guy that you really wanted to know about more.
Okay, I didn't quite catch all of that. So what'd you say?
I think I have a bit of a delay, just like James. Right?
Do what?
I think I have a bit of a delay, like James.
What about James?
Yeah.
She has a delay.
Oh, yeah, a delay. Okay, yeah. Anyway, so, all right. So we'll let you read what you read, and then we'll discuss. So hopefully the delay is not too bad. So, all right. The floor is yours, Neda. I'm excited.
Okay. So I hope you hear me clearly, which I doubt, because I feel there is a little bit of cut and delay. Right? Do you hear me, Sebastian?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, the delay is not too bad so far. So, Yeah. If all of a sudden there's a,
hopefully you
I'll
catch
jump in if there is.
it.
Okay, so, all right.
This is a part of a trilogy kind of thing I'm writing, and I need to explain a little bit. It's about a woman that is working, that is pushed to work in the fetish industry. So there are a lot of sex in it and drugs and stuff like that. So after hearing Austin poetry, I feel like this one is a little bit shallow, but let's see. Okay, so it's for fun more. Okay, so I started. It's just a bit of a part from one of the customers for the first time she meets. A black and white TV, blindfolded men, and 3 of them standing in a row, tightrope to 3 planks in a prison yard. Sun was shining in the sky and flooding the camera, declaring the first light. The blindfolded men bearded, their lips dry, shivering. One had a smile on his lips. Cigarettes were offered to them by soldiers. The soldiers then stood a few meters away from them. Upon the command, ready, they brought out their guns. The guns were loaded with a click. Another command, aim. The guns were locked on the target. Last command, fire. Bang. One round fired into the chest area of the man. Blood splattered on the wall. The man fell on their knees. It was my first encounter with death, although I still remember. I can't recall why I was allowed to watch the channel alone at the age of 2 or 3, but the flashbacks of that scene lingered with me until now. During the time when the revolutionary portrayed blindfolded men as the axis of evil, I felt hollow witnessing their death. I couldn't comprehend why it happened, why they had to die, or why they were blindfolded. But that scene had something that distorted my mind. It was when I began fantasizing by being blindfolded, naked, and watched by soldiers, without comprehending the complexity of any of these events. My innocent mind was raped by images that were not meant for me to see, and things that I was not meant to learn. I grew accustomed to the idea of being tied to a plan while being watched, and for some reason, it gave me a sense of comfort. The thumping beats of the club music gradually intensified in my drunken mind. My hazy vision caught glimpses of the blue and purple lights flickering around me. My target customer in his tiny suit was half drunk himself. He was a high potential gig among the Italian customers whom Mr. Golden had recommended. To prepare for this gig, I underwent a 2-day training on how to handle the situation. Etoile had no concrete solution to turn this mysterious man into a long-term sponsor, but she believed it was essential for me to learn how to be properly dominant in such a specific situation, how to control and manipulate him if I ever get a chance to fulfill his desire. I knew that his fetish extended beyond the realm of these encounters, encompasses food fetish, smoke fetishes, and fiendom. However, he was smart enough to know that his addiction to being humiliated and dominated financially could harm him, so he tended to avoid long-term relationships altogether. This meant winning him over was no easy feat. He was a pig-pay, as Etoile said, and he would enjoy being called that way during the act. Gazing at his seemingly pure and attractive countenance, I pondered over the extent to which one can degrade oneself in order to release sexually, being called as such. Etoile said men like him do not necessarily experience physical arousal. Rather, the act of giving up money up to the dominatrix sparks a fundamental desire to please in their psyche. So it was more a matter of emotional manipulation than anything else, which I sucked at. There were 5 of us girls, with 3 men in suit, and this made it more challenging for the competition. The target, despite being a billionaire, preferred to go with the moniker Millionaire M, likely due to a past experience where he lost a significant amount of money and a woman took advantage of his fetish. It was also a way for him to signal that he had reached a point in a dating life where he was no longer rejected for his 127 centimeter stature. He was originally Italian, and he inherited a considerable sum from his aunt and has since become one of the most successful individuals with dwarfism on a global level. He was a popular guy in the club among girls who saw him as the ATM machine he was, or for women with dwarf fetishes. Despite all, he was a picky one. All I knew was that he needed a girl to act bossy, dominant, and bitchy. While I could be a bitch he needed, I hated deeply to ask for money. So all I could do was trusting it all what she said. I looked bitchy enough for him to choose me. He sat comfortably in his black tailor-to-fit suit. His perfectly aside brown hair and beard framed his face. Despite his size, his features were handsome, with hazel eyes that seemed to sparkle with wealth and power, along with his expensive jewelry. While he cheered on the other girls in the room who were dancing for him, he hardly looked at me. He seemed to me that he was confident with everyone else, shy when it came to me. I could relate to that. However, I caught him glancing at my feet every time I changed the position of my legs. Sensing an opportunity, I sat next to him, stretched my legs, and placed them on the table close to him. The pair of Walters Tiger's bright orange heels, which had a bow on the back and a thin strap holding them on my toes, grabbed his attention. I lit a cigarette, having practiced for the past few days to avoid coughing. He finally looked at me in the eyes. I smiled and offered him a cigar, which he accepted, and I lit it for him. He leaned close to my ear, talking over the music. "Take your puff, it's a springtime," he said. "Pardon?" I asked coldly. "You smoke seldom, but I bet you're not a smoker, otherwise you knew that it's their slogan." He said, "Puff the smoke away from me." The cigarette was bigger than his fingers. I lounged in my place as if I was home, comfortable. True, I don't smoke. I just have it in my back for whenever I feel. "I can tell. I like that you look amateur for smoking." He laughed. "I've never imagined myself to be attracted to a gray dwarf, and I wasn't." And I let out a chuckle. The smoke involuntarily rushed back into my lungs, causing me a cough. I could tell from the way he was looking at me that he found it amusing. We both shared a laugh, while one of the girls in the room looked on with disappointment, but I savored the feeling of having won his attention. He reached out and placed his hand on my bare knee. Leaning in closer, I said, "Will you go to my car with me?" "Car?" I asked. "Like a hooker?" "Perhaps," he said. "A hooker," I thought. Was I different? Was I any different than the other women out there selling their bodies? No shame in that. In a corrupted society in which poverty is treated as a need to sustain the economy, how a person selling their body could be ashamed? We were the product of capitalism. It's the system that should be ashamed. "You want me to act like a hooker?" I asked. "No, I want you more like a pimp, dominating. Fancy acting one?" "I think about it," I said. He was pleased. "Oh, darling, I want you to do many things to me." "Like what?" I asked, pushing him to play. "Let's go on, I'll show you." He replied. I knew he loved to be pushed, so I said, "No, I'm not convinced. It'll be fine." He put his hand between my inner thighs and caressed. I'm great with my hand and tongue. "That's boring, babe. Who can do that?" I smiled. "Let me satisfy you. I eat you for hours." I'm sorry, gosh, there's so many of these. No, no touch. No, nothing sexual. Please," he begged. "I don't want to be touched here. I don't want to be touched there." I said, "No pride zone at all." I said, rays of excitement in his face. "I won't touch that, I promise. Tell me what I can do to you." "Let me see." I savored the moment, reaching every sip and puff. The smoke gently wafted from my lips, dancing in the air before vanishing into nothingness. You can kiss my feet if you promise to be a good piggy." He looked agitated. "Let me kiss your feet. I'll suck your toes. You deserve to step on me and spit on me, walk on me, do whatever you want to me. I gave that to you without any emotions. Raise an eyebrow, lead the way, but don't bore me or I leave. And please prove to me that you're not such as useless as you look. I said, feeling terrible deep down. He simply nodded, keeping his head down as he walked among the rest of the team that they followed. In his limousine, he served me champagne. And when he wanted to sit by me, I shouted, no, on your knees, sit down there. I pointed down my feet. With excitement, he ran and sat down in front of me like a dog. The whites of his eyes were tinted red. As I presumed, he was either high or horny. I quickly downed my champagne. I was on the verge of getting blacked out drunk myself. I handed him the bottle and demanded, remove my shoes and wash my feet with this. Sure. No, I commanded. Sure, mistress. I yelled. I'm sorry, mistress. It felt good this time to dominate, unlike my experience with Mr. Barking. It's another customer. He took off my shoes, and I watched in amazement at this powerful man who could make me disappear with with a snap of his finger. Knelt down before me and began washing my feet with champagne. I always had this reputation as a dominant and strong-willed woman. Many men asked me if I was one, but the truth was that I longed to be tied down, flogged, tortured, and forced fucked. I have never desired to inflict pain on others, but rather crave the sensation of being overpowered and taken. In this moment, as this man washed my feet, I felt different, enjoying the moment to control rather than being controlled. Will you stop your toes, mistress? No, I uttered, removing my feet from his grasp and pressing his sole against his forehead. His skin felt warm and sweaty. I pushed him with my foot, and he fell backward. I lit another cigarette. Don't move, stay there, I said. I let my dominant appearance bring out the inner monster within me. He let down, gazing at me as I spread my legs, touching myself through my chew underwear and smoking. I could tell by the bulge in his pants and a playful twinkle in his eyes that he was aroused. Take off your pants and play with yourself, Kate, I said. He obeyed so fast as if he was yearning for it. He stripped down while I lay down. He held his eggplant-like cock in hand and synchronized his throat with mine. A tickle sensation aroused me. Sadistic release, perhaps. His hand motions and breathing are getting faster. Stop, I said. You can't come without my permission. I apologized in stress. His one voice hoarse. Good. Lie down here. He lied down by my feet and I put my bare foot on his chest and caressed down to his cock. He quivered, moaned, but he lifted my foot. You don't deserve my foot. I don't deserve your foot, he repeated. I deserve your shoes. Punish me, he said. Yes, you're right, Piggy. I took my shoes and put them on his chest and pressed them gently. He uttered, please, mistress, punish me harder. I deserve worse. I'm sorry. I'm bad, Piggy. I pressed the shoes harder. Pointy heels were indenting his skin. Harder, he said, and I pressed harder. So hard I scared to hurt him. Harder, he repeated. Wondering, was it him the submissive or me taking the command? As I couldn't cause any bleeding, I yelled, don't tell me what to do. I'm the mistress, not you. Kiss my foot, loser. I put the sole on my feet on his face, and he kissed it eagerly. Look at me. Sit here. I gestured down, indicating between my thighs. His face lit up with excitement, envisioning the possibility of tasting me. Seizing a fistful of thick hair, I drew his face toward me. But just as he was about to dive in, I denied him access. Instead, I explored myself, slipping my hand beneath my underwear. The ash from my cigarette fell carelessly onto the skin as I indulged in my fake pleasure. He looked up at me. Let me suck your toes and I buy you whatever you want. I stopped touching myself, held the cigar between my wet fingers, and put a foot on his shoulder. I ran an audio. I said it without hesitation, fully aware that this was a make or break moment. It was all part of the power play, and I knew that he wasn't giving me a second chance if I acted timid. There were no expectations, but I had to be bold if I wanted to get anywhere with this guy. Anything for mistress, yeah. I nodded and I put my foot in his mouth, on his mouth. He grabbed it with both hands and inhaled deeply, savoring my scent. His gaze lingered on the arcs of my feet before he proceeded to lick the soles, starting from the heel and gradually making his way up. Unexpectedly, a tickling sensation shot through me. Unlike Monsieur Barking, who lacked delicacy, this man knew how to make me feel something. Despite the urge to burst into laughter, I managed to control myself. As he reached the top, he took my big toe into his mouth, then followed by my little toe. My mind was foggy, weighed down by a feeling of lethargy. I felt the sensation of warmth and moisture slithering along the sole of my feet, pressure of his lips as he sucked on my toes. It was a curious mix of tightness, heat, and wetness, as he lavished attention on each toe, gently pulling and caressing them. His moans and groans rhythmic. The painful tickling sensation of my feet and toe being sucked was only half of the torture. The other half was the thought of selling myself and becoming someone I never imagined I would be. The idea of becoming a prostitute was more frightening than when I was actually doing it for money. The 12 words echoed in my mind. It would become a profession, and slowly but surely you would break down values and taboos until they become a new norm. You will mold you into a new person, someone you may love or hate more than you did before. I shut my eyes, taking a drag of cigarette, and allowed myself and this man to revel in the moment. My thoughts wandered to Carl. I envisioned him touching me, licking me, teasing me. I imagined him inside me. I pictured his face, his moans and groans, and it all of a sudden felt much easier for me to surrender to pleasure. That's it, and I'm sorry. Finished.
All right, excellent. All right, we have any questions? Oh, come on, that was a good sex scene right there. That's what Cody and I live for, right?
Very much, yeah.
That was.
Yep. Sex and drugs, the only real reason to live.
So obviously, you so Neda, you obviously English isn't your first language, but so do you write everything in English? Like, because that it blows my mind, like how you could do that in a second language.
I used to write in my language, but recently I just write in English. It's much easier for me to express. In my language, I have this idea of self-censorship, but in English I don't. Like, I prefer English.
Quite catch it, but do you? So when you actually sit down to write, do you write in English or like to begin with, or do you translate it after you've done it?
No, I don't translate. I write in English. I don't know if you did that.
Yeah, Manny Torres we had on last time. He's the same way. English is his second language too. And he writes in I believe he can I believe he writes in English. I mean, the one thing that's interesting is English or any language being a second language, you're more sensitive, you're more consciously sensitive to the nuances. So when I was in college, I tutored a lot of ESL students, right? So for those that don't know, English is a second language. And they had a far better grasp. And this would apply to any language. Like if I were to learn French or whatever, I would have a far better understanding of the inner workings of the language. And once I mastered that, I would be a far better writer in that. Where when you read Manny's stuff, it's phenomenal. Or when just listening to Neda, it was great. I will say that, and Neda can chime in at any time, but you miss a lot of the local pragmatic stuff, right? So, like, I remember, and Neda can tell me if she's had similar experiences, but I remember when I was tutoring one person, and she came in and she wanted to write a piece about two people having sex, right? So, what word did she use? She used fornicate. She says, these two fornicators. Now, technically, that's correct, right? I mean, we all know that that's correct. But the connotation, it's got a kind of a religious negative connotation. And so I had to explain to her, semantically, you are correct. You're describing the act correctly. But that's a antiquated church kind of like way of describing sex in a puritanical way. You'd want to say lovers or something like that. And so I'll ask Neda, so going off of James's point, I'll ask Neda, has that been your experience where you've learned the semantics of the language, but picking up on the pragmatic usage of words, has that been kind of a sticky point for you?
Yeah, it still happens to me. So I sometimes I use words that it has the same meaning, but it doesn't necessarily like based on a native. I won't say if I was a native, I wouldn't use it. But in my first practice, this happened. So after I understand that I want to be somebody, a professional editor and proofreader to fix it, and at that level, hopefully they will fix it. But at the before that, I think I have quite few.
All right. Other questions for Neda?
I'm open to any question. Don't fear. Fear not.
Oh, Neda, I have a question for you. Is this the one that we're gonna take on in 2024?
I think so, but as I told you, it will be a long piece. I don't know if it matches your criteria.
I mean,
If they are wrong.
seems. I don't know. I mean, we're pretty. I don't know. We're. I mean, it sounds like it does. I know you had something in the works for us. I know you have a lot of things in the fire, but is this the one with the? I don't know if I plan. I know you and I have been talking. I don't know if I planted this idea or you already had it in your head, but is this the novel with the rich midget fetishist?
Yeah, that was the guy.
Oh, that was the guy. Okay, yeah, it was a little bit of breaking out in and out, so I didn't. Yeah, I was excited because I was like, oh, hope she reads the thing about the midget. So yeah, great. All right, Cody, you have any questions for Neda? This is all sex stuff. Come on, can't let this opportunity pass by.
Well, you have any first-hand experience with any of this stuff that you wrote about?
No, unfortunately not. I should say unfortunately. No.
Okay.
Not this one.
I will say you described kind of from there was a bit of breaking up, so but from what I could tell, you did describe like how somebody feels going to see a dominatrix pretty well, right? Because like you go to a dominatrix for that like loss of control, right? Anybody been to a dominatrix? If you've never been, I highly recommend it. Like, highly, at least one time, because it's like, it's really freeing. Like it really is. It's like so. That's why there's that stereotype, right? I think it's a stereotype, but at least there's a stereotype about like the wealthy, CEO guy going in to it. There's something about that loss of control and like letting go that's got to be one step removed from enlightenment, right? At least that's how I think of it, but yeah. All right, anybody else, or shall we go on? I think Steve is next, but if there's more questions for Neda.
Just I missed where that came from. Where can I find that? Like to sort of read it again. Because Sebastian said it cut out a few times, but yeah, I'd like to read it.
It's the first book of the series, so I'm working on writing the first draft, and we were talking with Sebastian to publish it, because before it wasn't supposed to be a free book, but it went on. So basically we have to discuss over this. We can publish it with Sebastian, or we can do something else. But anyway, in any case, I think it will come out next year, maybe next year.
It's currently a work in progress right now. So
okay.
Yeah,
yes.
But I'm excited for
Keep
it.
my eyes peeled.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for it. I know you've been working on this for a while, right? Like since I've been talking to you a couple of years, you've been, right?
Yeah. 2 years for the first book.
Right on. All right, Steve, let's transition to you. Introduce yourself, and the floor is yours, brother.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Is there a delay, or you can hear me decently?
You're coming through loud and clear, man.
Okay, good. Yeah, of course, recently Cody's published a collection of pieces of mine under the title Alone on the Couch with a Gun in My Mouth, which is out recently. So I was going to read some selections from there. I'm going to insert one piece into it I hadn't planned to read. And, listening to Austin talk about fentanyl and street level drug addiction in Arizona, I mean, we had the same kind of stuff here. And, to preface the first piece I'll read, a guy I worked with in my commercial real estate days, our construction superintendent, his son was an RCMP police officer in a very small town in central Alberta. I mean, I think 1,500 people. But anyways, he'd used his Narcan kit on the same guy, 3 fentanyl overdoses, the same guy in slightly less than 2 days, like in a 30-hour period. He'd ask the guy the third time he revives him, he said, why, buddy, why do you keep doing this? You're going to wind up dead. Is that what you want? Do you want to die? And the guy said to him, he said, no. He said, I don't really want to die, but I like the feeling of being dead. And so I have many fentanyl stories and have written about it, and you're going to hear one right away. Fentanyl, man, it's ubiquitous. I would think there's more fentanyl on the streets right now than weed's legal here, and probably a lot of jurisdictions in the U.S. But I think there's more fentanyl on the streets now than there was weed, back in the days when it was illegal, which wasn't too long ago, Now, I don't mind saying you don't have to buy. You just go for a walk any evening, and a pleasant contact high through the neighborhood will carry you, But anyhow, so the first piece.
Well, can I just interject just one thing? So, fentanyl's prescription, right?
I mean, it is an emergency room, sedative or analgesic painkiller or whatever. The fentanyl you can find on the streets here, it's home brewed. It's again the dealers. I'm not sure how it's made. And again, one of the problems with it is a story. Again, my oldest son was a social worker for all. He worked in a place that tries to find housing for homeless people. And one of his clients had passed away, and he'd split one fentanyl tab with another guy. And however, one guy got nothing. He didn't even get high because the manufacturing process for these guys are, in essence, it's the bathtub gin of fentanyl. So there's no actual fentanyl in one half of the tab. And the other guy that got the fentanyl, all of it in his tab, he passed away, he died. And I've got a lot of fentanyl stories like that that come to me anecdotally. Somebody left there, when I was in the commercial real estate business, I was usually the first guy in the office. And one day, just right there in our vegetable was an Narcan kit. It was in where I'm from, we have something called the Diversion Outreach Team, which provides invaluable service. I really respect those guys. And so we just call them and they come and pick it up. And we had a safe injection, a safe consumption site, which doesn't exist anymore. I don't think it was well run, and that's a topic for another time. I still think that we should do it, and move to that kind of Portuguese model of treating, addiction as a health crisis and a mental health crisis, as opposed to a law enforcement issue. But again, lots of fentanyl stories. So I'll start out with this one poem, and it is in the collection, Alone on the Couch with a Gun in My Mouth. This is in there. So I'll start there and then read a couple of others from that collection. Thanks to Cody for publishing it. And this one's called Fentanyl Fuck So Good. The Somalis brought it, and I don't know where they got it. They're coming in from Edmonton, driving slow at 3 a.m. They're coming through the reservation, and they're stopping here and there. They'll sell me as much as I want to buy. It's more than enough to last me, not quite long enough, but I like the feeling of being dead, even though I mostly don't want to die. I don't want no naloxone. No, I don't wake up like that, pulled from the womb with forceps and dropped on the pavement. When I'm on, I hear her voice, my spiritual mother speaking softly to me in the void, saying, give me more of those pills, more of those pills, more of those pills. And that is Fentanyl Fuck So Good. And then I think I'm gonna go read. I'll tell you what, because Neda had a really excellent sex scene, I'm going to read Strawberry Shortcake Forever, which is again from the collection, Out with Anxiety. And so Strawberry Shortcake Forever. It's 90 in the shade and it's hot, so hot. When I tell her, I want you to put on panties, white cotton panties, the ones with the little cartoon people on them. I want you to walk around the block, and when you come back, take them off and give them to me. I'll put them in my mouth and I'll suck back every bit of that funky, salty goodness I can get. But I don't say that. I turn back to the TV and she goes back upstairs, and I don't say anything to that either. But there was a time. Okay. We've covered drugs and sex. So let's go to suicide. This is a titular piece, or titular. I don't even know how to pronounce that word. I probably shouldn't be writing. I'm not very articulate. This is called Alone on the Couch with a Gun in My Mouth. Someone asked me, how do you roll? I said that every so often I wind up on the couch. I sit all alone with a gun in my mouth. Susie, I call her. Susie is in suicide. Suzanne, baby, is there a chance? Can we finally fuck? Or do you just want to dance? She wants me to call her mama. She insists that if I love her enough, I'll call her mama, just like she likes. But Susie, Suzanne, baby, I ain't ready for that. It's just that every so often I wind up on the couch, sitting alone with a gun in my mouth. And I'm also going to give Austin credit for this one because he's in Arizona. I have been there. I actually have family in Arizona. And So I've got a poem in the collection. It's called Arizona. Wow, what are the chances? So Arizona. We light it up and blaze away, imagining 1,000 moments or even just one moment better than what we had today. She goes into the bathroom, leaving the door slightly ajar. I hear her pissing and she yawns midstream, and I laugh out loud at that. She hears me and she knows, so she laughs out loud too. That's a moment. Tomorrow, we'll get drive-through coffee, then go in comfortable silence to our hours, just hours, because we don't get enough of them to call them jobs. We need the hours for weed and to stay just a little behind on rent. But this too is true. We had the same dream one night at the exact same time, where we dreamt we lived in Arizona in a trailer purchased cheaply out of foreclosure, and we sat on our porch with our guns across our laps and our pit bulls at our feet, drinking cold beer and smoking a perfect blend with the constellations high above us. And I had her name tattooed on my neck, and I knew I'd made the right call, and everything was all right. So that's Arizona. And so what have we done? We've done fentanyl, we've done sex, we've done suicide, we've done Arizona, which is important. Arizona should probably deserve its whole chapter, but I've only got the one. And let's do murder. Okay, and this one's called Every Anxious Sucking Breath. That night, I was driving high and alone on the streets at 3 a.m. and I saw two men in an empty lot rolling up something heavy in a blue plastic tarp and putting it in the back of a minivan. I looked at them and they looked at me, and I thought about how I'd duct tape them to chairs and put the chairs in the min back to back. I'd put plastic bags over their heads and watch the bags fill their mouths with every anxious sucking breath, and how they wouldn't say anything, couldn't say anything, and how I'd not speak to them, and I'd just douse the plastic with gas and stand there a minute, able to smell their sweat above the octane in the night. And then I would set them both on fire, and their minivan too, and I'd sit back and watch everything burn. But before any of that, before I'd even finished the thoughts in the order necessary to form intent, one of those men turned to me and held a lighter up in his right hand and lit it. And he gave me the thumbs up with his left hand, and we were, all of a sudden, all cool with this, whatever this is. So how's that? How am I doing for time? Am I over?
Nah, man, you're doing good. You're fine. If you want to keep going another poem or two, you're good to rock, dude.
I'll tell you what, I'll read one more. And then I can either quit there, or I do have a poetry joke, and there are not many poetry jokes, so I could tell that. But I'll convene with you guys after I read the next one, and then we'll take it from there. So this one's called For All of the Suicides on Christmas Day. Feel sorry for a stray dog with a limp. Feel sorry for a cat with frost-bitten ears. Feel sorry for a 10-year-old kid at school with no lunch and no lunch money. Feel sorry for a 50-year-old man working for a commission that's less than minimum wage. Feel sorry for that woman with a black eye. She has 2 children under 3, and her bank card has just been declined at Walmart while 20 other people stand in line behind her, waiting and waiting. Feel sorry for the cops that go to suicides every year on Christmas Day. Stores that sell things to rich white women sell candles now that are so infused with the chemical lavender, you can breathe them in, close your eyes, and imagine an old lady dying alone in a house full of cats. Across the street, a man sits alone on a couch watching football. You'll miss me when I'm dead and gone, he says, when there's no one to pay for all your shit. No one else in the house hears him. He won't be missed. Feel sorry for them, all of them, and bleed a little bit when they bleed, and maybe pray that God lets them all have a little Christmas on Suicide Day. So there's some poems, and that's all from the collection from Anxiety Pressed, Alone on the Couch with a Gun in My Mouth. And I do have a joke about poetry. Have you got time, or we can keep going, whatever. Does anybody want to hear a poetry joke or no?
100%. Hit us with the joke.
Okay. This joke is actually fairly innocuous. I heard this a long time ago and tell it all the time, so I wonder if you guys have heard it. But I don't know if you guys knew, but every year the International Poet Society has a big poetry competition and declare, a world champion spoken word poet. Anyways, we're going to say 2022, and the 3-year reigning champions of Poet Laureate of Great Britain. As you can imagine, a very, very well-spoken individual. Anyways, 2022, the finals, the Poet Laureate of Great Britain and a cowboy poet from Alberta, Canada. And anyways, they're the last two left in the show. Nobody's given this cowboy from Alberta any kind of chance at all. And the MC, of course, brings the two guys up on stage at some big auditorium in the UK, probably one of the places James reads. But and he says, okay, you know how this is done? We select a prompt, provide it to both of you. And, you have a couple minutes to compose yourself, speak your poem, and the winner is decided by audience applause. And he said, so we've drawn straws backstage. And as you know, the defending champ, the Poet Laureate of Great Britain's going first, and the cowboy poet from Alberta goes second. And he says, are you gentlemen ready? And they both, nod their heads, say they are. And the MC says, okay, the topic is Timbuktu. And so it's quiet. The Poet Laureate of Great Britain composes himself, thinks, steps up to the microphone. Across the burning desert lands strode the dusty caravan, the camels marching 2 by 2, destination Timbuktu. While the audience loses it, 5 minutes standing ovation. Looks like a 4th straight championship for the Poet Laureate of Great Britain, world's greatest poet. But finally they settle down and give the cowboy poet his chance. So he walks on up to the microphone and he says, after a little bit of thought, me and Tim a-hunting went, found 3 whores in a pop-up tent. I was tired and thirsty too, so I buck one and Tim buck 2. Ever since he's been the champ. So there you go. There's not many jokes in poetry, and that's the only one I got. Poetry is often very serious, and I write serious poetry. Seriously, if you listen to my stuff, you'd think I was no fun at all, and that's probably true. But I do know that one joke, so there you go.
No, I mean, the way you write poems and the way Austin, is great. So I was enthralled when you and Austin were reading, right? But so much, I mean, I don't mean to be like this, but so much of poetry is just pretentious cocksucking, right? Have you ever listened to read anything by T.S. Eliot?
Oh yeah.
It's fucking god awful, right? And the guy was a self-proclaimed snob. He thought oh, well, we are the purveyors of high taste. Go fuck yourself, right? This shit that you need fucking 3 PhDs to read, right? Try reading The Wastelands and staying awake reading that pretentious horse shit. It wasn't until Bukowski came around that I'm oh, wow, you can actually read poetry with substance that's not just all flowery style, right? Because Bukowski is just bam, 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 bam. And with your stuff, Steve, and with Austin's, it's bam, 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 right? It's great. It's phenomenal, right? I mean, and you touch on important topics like suicide, murder, overdoses. I mean, it's, in my book, top notch. And obviously Cody thinks the same because he published you, right? So
Definitely.
Yeah. I think, it's funny. I have a long story about Bukowski. I told Cody about this too. And I know she's going to watch this, so I'll bring it up now. But I had actually and dated a woman for a while, and her mother had lived with Bukowski. And her mother was the character Tammy in the book Women. And I had not read, I had seen quotes from Bukowski. I'd never read Bukowski until I met this girl. And then they sent me a copy of Woman. Her mother wrote a really excellent memoir of her time with Bukowski. And anyway, so I started reading that. I'd written before, but never even tried poetry. And again, the formality of it, I thought the same thing. It was snob stuff. I don't know what a sonnet is or a villanelle or any of the technical stuff. Poetry for me as a reader prior to about 10 years ago, it was something that was in the realm of the academic and, pointy-headed, opinionated people who they weren't going to read my fiction anyways. And I wasn't going to read T.S. Eliot, and that probably doesn't. I should read T.S. Eliot, but anyways, then discovered Bukowski through this strange set of happenstance, and Ginsberg, the Beats, and some other stuff. Started reading a lot more online, and I would say I don't actually tell people I write poetry. I say I write observational narratives written line by line. But that's what those guys did, and that made me think that I could do it, that I could write these things, and it wasn't garbage, it wasn't worthless, that it had some kind of merit. And that's, so that's kind of where I started from. And the stuff I enjoy, and it's like Austin's, where there's a narrative line in there, there is something happening, as opposed to a really strict metronymic mathematical rhythm or junction. You know what I mean? I think some of Shakespeare's stuff is good. That Victorian pseudo pervert Dowson, I like some of his stuff. But for me, where it came alive for me was it was like Bukowski. Where it was life, it was real life, it was right there in front of you. It had a taste, a smell, a physicality, and that's what drew me. And that's where my influences were.
Yeah, it sounds like you and I are the same in that it's got that visceral essence, right? Where it touches a part of you really deeply, right? That's what I feel when I listen to stuff like what you and Austin or Bukowski or people in that kind of more free form style. Mm-hmm. That's what I get. I get that visceral, it's like I get a whole story. I mean, I don't know how everybody else felt when they listened to Steve and Austin, but it's like I didn't just get a snapshot, right? Like with the one about sitting on the couch with the gun in your mouth. I got a whole story. In my head, that could be like a whole novel about a guy struggling daily, right, with suicide. And that was just a relatively, I don't know how many lines that was, but I got a very clear picture, right? So,
that's great. That's what I'm trying to do. When you read something, I do anyways, when you read something and you like it, when you read that poem, that first Bukowski thing you read or whatever, and you'll see this line and you'll say, that's exactly right. I feel the same way. I understand that. I understand not everybody's going to get it. We come to these things from different places. I always thought to myself, if I like poetry, it's explanatory. It simplifies complex things and puts it right there for you. If poetry I read that I dislike, it seems to obscure things. Things get lost in kind of fancy rhyme schemes and too many adjectives or adverbs or something like that. Like I say, line by line declarative sentences, and there it is. Like it or lump it, but it's there. And so there's my philosophy of Posey.
That's great. All right. Anybody got questions for Steve besides me just running my mouth? Oh, Joe's here. We all love Reverend Joe. Oh, yeah, Joe is another. We got to get Joe on. We got to get Joe on here. Oh, fucking love Joe. So glad to have you in here, man. Yeah, Cody, we got to work out a thing. So my daughter has changed my YouTube name. Yeah, I figured something like that happened. It's all good, man. It's all good, dude. Hope you're doing well. I know you've been having some struggles over the last fucking year, but you're definitely one of the good ones. So, speaking of poetry, Reverend Joe is great. He's, if I can talk him up for a minute, he actually did the intro to, or the forward to my poetry book. And he's one of those like really cool reverends, there's the reverends that are like the foghorn leghorns, like shaking their finger. But then there's somebody like Joe that's, you know, very adjacent to somebody like Austin, right? Like trying to do well and speak for the downtrodden of society and, you know, speak up against power, kind of the stuff that you would find in, you know, Jesus doing in like the Gospels. And so nothing but respect for that kind of Christianity, in which it's trying to do good and it's just not devoted to just like hating people, which is mostly what we see now, right? So yeah, Joe's top notch. He's just glad he's in the chat. But anyway, we're going over, so let's get on to James, and the floor is unless anybody has any questions for Steve. All right, so James.
Yeah, sorry, it went all a bit haywire when the questions went there, so it sort of tuned out about it.
All right, no worries. All right, so
you said
the
about
floor.
How you didn't write poetry.
All right, so the floor is yours. I gotta go to the bathroom real quick, but the floor is yours, and I'll be back.
No probs. I don't know if you heard that, Steve. That was the whole thing tripped out when you'd finished. I was going to ask the question, but it's basically about like when you saying you wrote before you did poetry. So, at what point did you think I'm going to start doing poetry? Because myself personally, I do sort of more gritty realism and then dark humor and then grit sort of gangster stuff. So with what I'm about to read in a minute isn't going to be very poetic, but with some of the sort of gritty realism stuff, I suppose it probably is more borderline in that. But for me, I don't know when to, or I don't know if I feel a bit imposter syndrome making that switch from doing writing to writing poetry. So what made you think, okay, I'm doing poetry now?
You know, it was probably subtle, you know, because I'd written before. It's funny, when I very first started writing, I had this idea in my head that it had to be 5,000 words and nobody'd publish it. I don't know why I thought that, you know. I have no idea. The first story I ever wrote, I was in a errors and omissions insurance seminar. I used to work in the insurance business. This is quite a few years ago, and you can imagine how boring that was. So I started to pencil out my notepad. I wrote a couple of paragraphs of story about a guy who quits the day before his official retirement day. He actually calls in sick on his last day, so he doesn't have to put up with anybody saying goodbye or anything like that, like, you know, quitting a day early. And that's when I started writing. Anyways, flash forward a few years, and I realized things didn't have to be 5,000 words to be good. And so it was almost a process of just trying to contract things I'd written down to an essence, you know. And you could, when I write these out and they appear in the collection, they're always, like I say, line by line observational narratives, but I quite often write them out as paragraphs. And if I think it's good, if it's, you know, declarative sentences, they line up and it conveys what I'm trying to get at, then I just post the sentences in lines, and, you know, we call it poetry. If somebody wanted to call it flash fiction or line by line fiction, or I sometimes joke with friends and call it semi-fiction, hemi-fiction, demi-fiction. That's fine with me too. I think where I started to write poetry and become comfortable with the idea of poetry was when I realized that it didn't have to be super formal. You know, that I didn't have to go on stage and compete with the poet laureate of Great Britain for the world's greatest poet title. When I could just tell a very little story, so to speak, with as little embellishment as possible. You know, so I wouldn't say I sat down there one day and said, you know, I like poetry, I'm going to start writing it. It evolved as my own writing practices evolved, if that makes any sense. You know, it was the same stories I always told. They just got shorter and were distilled to a more concise point, you know. But at the risk of, I don't know, I probably sound pretentious.
So I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all, not at all. I suppose by default, really, with some of my shorts that are more the sort of gritty and filthy realism, I'm almost kind of doing that, but possibly I'm overcooking it because I'm thinking of trying to write it longer as a short story. Whereas I think that's great advice. Like the less is more. Sort of reduce it a little bit more.
But you know, I've done it both ways.
Cool.
You know, I've had little short poems and I thought, no, this needs to be longer. And then I'll be honest with you, by the time something's 500 words or so, it's going to expand into a story. I had a story published by Expat Press on their website. And that was actually, I'd written a series of 4 poems individually. And I realized, you know, they just belong together. So I added a few more words, called it a short story, and Expat put it up, you know, and so that, you know, I guess it can go either way. I don't want to say better, but poetry came for me as I started to let go ideas about the formal construction of short stories, flash fiction, poetry, novels, whatever. I started to write more of what we would call poetry, just as I paid less attention to, you know, what I thought was an academic understanding of writing. You know, that fiction had to be this, that nonfiction had to be that poetry has to, you know, have these accepted forms. Once I kind of gave up caring, I never cared too much about that, you know, and so once I kind of let myself go and just riff, you know, and say, does that make sense? And that's how it worked for me. I don't know if it worked for everybody. Some people might need a much more formal kind of approach, but I just kind of riff, you know.
Cool, man. Cool. Thank you for that. Right, I'll get on with it then. Probably thinking after listening to everybody else, I probably should have done some more of my filthy realism or something like that. But Cody has published my book recently, so I think it'd be rude not to read the first chapter. So, I mean, this is part of a planned free book trilogy. Parochial Pigs is already out, and it basically sort of follows the story of a deranged British gangster who sort of fantasizes that he thinks he's one of the Krays, whereas he's just insane, to be fair with you. It's very dark humour. So it's just sort of brick grit gangster stuff, really. So this is the second book, Some Bleach Scarecrows. Philoscopus colubita tristis. Detective Constable Austin Healy peered through the binoculars as his heart bounced excitedly. The practiced breathing intended for this such scenario was being put to the test as the adrenaline flowed around his body. It was all he could do to stay motionless. He blended in with the wet earth and fallen bracken. The expensive all-in-one ghillie suit wouldn't have looked out of place in a B-movie horror. It disguised him perfectly. Ever since getting the tip-off on the target, Austin Healy had planned for this night. Finally, he could cross this one off the list. He watched the tree line under the canopy of leaves, careful to not make any sound, adjusting the binoculars. It didn't matter if he was missing the works party for this. Too long he'd waited for this moment, and besides, it wasn't like any of his colleagues would miss him. Austin wasn't what you'd call popular. He'd joined the police force with high hopes. It would be the start to a new life where he could be respected for wanting to uphold justice. He'd looked forward to making a real difference with like-minded colleagues, but all he found along the way was corruption, bullying, and favouritism. The latter he'd never possessed. The bullying was plenty. It reminded him more of past school days and his time as a prefect. Austin had never been able to comprehend why his strict code of honesty and the upholding of his moral obligation to law isolated him from fellow officers. Yes, there had been many times when this information led to injuries, suspensions, and one honourable, but that was just. Yet this only served to distance him further from the affection of his superiors, and even worse, overlooked for promotion. How he wished the Internal Investigation Division would recognise his work, the filthy law-breaking he'd witnessed from his own colleagues, men and women who were bound by a sacred honour, brazenly flaunting the law. He'd seen it all, from accepting free breakfasts to allowing offenders to go with no charge. Austin only recently watched an officer of the law letting a female driver go after being stopped for using a mobile phone. In the process, she'd almost mounted the curb and hit an old lady. Almost, but not. Still, laws were meant to be followed as far as Austin was concerned. His partner had taken the lead. Austin watched from the police car, unable to believe the vile abuse of law. The fellow officer was brazenly laughing with the offender, leaning against their car in a relaxed manner. He took something from the woman as she passed it out the window. The officer tapped the roof of her car and waved. His smile spread from ear to ear like the Cheshire cat. Austin's partner produced a piece of folded up paper. Got her number. She was well fit, mate. I'm going to smash the fuck out of that. Naturally, it was only Detective Constable Austin Healy's obligation to take this information to his boss, Chief Superintendent Cole Bragg. His wasn't impressed. Austin had in an official complaint, in Bragg left to the officer, who he was quite fond of, and disciplined him to the letter of the law. To Austin's chagrin, he was rewarded with a reassignment to a desk for 2 months. Maybe he was just in the wrong department. Surely this sort of treatment wasn't usual across the entire British police force. Tonight, he cast frustrations aside, for he was close to his target. The tree branch shook slightly in front of him. It wasn't a gust of wind. The air had been still all night, almost unusually. No, this was it. Adjusting the binoculars, he took a deep breath to steady his vision, not wanting to miss the chance. Suddenly, he was startled to the sound of something crashing through the undergrowth. Come on, do me here, you dirty bastard. This is what you paid me for, innit? The plump and scantily dressed woman said as she trailed off with a filthy laugh. An older man, pounding his hands up and down on his small erect penis, mock chased after her. Oh, you dirty minx. Let me spank you with my wicked wand. Somewhere in between dirty and bastard, Austin had seen all his hard work just take off. Literally. The unannounced intruders had scared off the rare bird before he could properly focus his camera. Gone, the elusive Philoscopus colobita tristis, or more commonly known as the Siberian chiffchaff. Well, at least it was in the bird-watching community. This was the very bird Austin had spent hours, if not weeks, of planning and patience upon. And now the two doggers in a sexual fury had ruined everything. The filthy perverts. He would bring them in for that was for sure. The woman's claim to have been paid hadn't gone over Austin's head either. He rose from the undergrowth as the couple stopped in stunned horror. The effect was lost on Austin, as he hadn't remembered the camouflage suit he was wearing. To the immobile pair, it looked like Swamp Thing rising from the forest floor. The woman screamed as he read in their rights. It's a fucking monster! Police! Shouted Austin. The man was not impressed. Now look here, young man. A sorry-looking erect cock still protruding from his fly. I don't know your rank or well, who the fuck you are, but I'd be careful if I were you, sunshine. Chief Superintendent Bragg happens to be a good friend of mine. Perhaps it'd be better if we all just walked away. How dare this perv bring his superior into it? Austin was fuming. He didn't care what relationship the depraved sex offender thought he had with his superior. Austin would make sure this was dealt with using the full force of the law. He finished the arrest and ordered the pair back to the forest. He would have to squeeze them both into the small Toyota Aria he owned. It wouldn't win him any fans bringing in an arrest tonight. The staff would be thin on the ground as it was due to the party. Most of his colleagues would have been only too happy to let the perps walk free in exchange for some more drinking time. Perhaps some inter-work-related flirting. That was what Austin despised most about the works dues. What is it you want? Money? The man asked Austin as he pulled the front seat forward, trying to squeeze the large woman into the back. What the hell were you doing waiting in the woods dressed as a fucking tree anyway? Get in the vehicle, sir. You're under arrest. Please keep quiet until we get to the station. Job's worth, prick, the man muttered. Suddenly, Austin felt better about the bird. At least it hadn't all been for nothing. 2 arrests for indecent exposure and a possible soliciting offence. A good night's work. Or so he thought. I won't keep going on too much more.
I have to applaud that man for maintaining an erection through all of this. All this whole ordeal. This guy sustains his erection. That's commitment. That's a level of commitment right there.
definitely.
Yeah, I thought that in with the sex element as Neda and Steve off as well. So
I just want to say I love listening to you read. You know, like I said, I'd rather listen to you read than watch a Guy Ritchie movie, and I love Guy Ritchie movies. You know, so I thought the accent part and everything like that, you handled that well. I know in
that
England,
means a lot.
I know in England, like people, you can tell where people are from in subtle ways from the accent. Do you differentiate that way very specifically? Like, are some of your characters Geordies or some, from other parts? Do you think of that when you're writing and reading that?
Yeah, I certainly do. Like I used to have a lot of passion for acting back at school. I wouldn't actually. Sebastian and Cody probably aware of Bam Barrow. He's sent you guys a book quite recently. Many moons ago, we did a little indie film that was a gangster film, and that kind of inspired the beginning of Parochial Pigs. So yeah, things like that. I can't deviate away from it. If I'm terrible at work, but if I'm relying on what somebody said to me at work, I can't help but drop in and out of their accent, stuff like that. So it's quite a big part of when I'm writing as well. I wouldn't do Geordie though, because it's an accent I can't do. But yeah, all of my characters, I think you, yeah, in your head. They're always in your head. The way the sort of local dialect is, things like that.
Well, cool, really cool.
Yeah, I was going to add what we need to get that made into an audiobook and have you narrate it. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
I
second.
did have-
Yeah, you'd be a good narrator. Yeah, you'd be a good narrator for that. Yeah, it was a phenomenal reading. Yeah.
Thank you. A very nervous reading. Funny enough, my godfather was going to do Parochial Pigs as an audiobook. He's sort of been in the sort of sound engineer and recording business for donkey's years, but unfortunately he's quite ill last year, and spoke to him the other day, and he said it's going to be too much for him. So yeah, I mean, my mate's got a studio. That's just having the time to do it. So that might be something we do talk about, Cody. You're up for that?
Yeah. Sounds good for me. Down.
All right. Other questions for James? I don't know a lot about the UK police. I have a lot of derisive things to say about the US police, but I don't. All I know is that isn't it that your officers over there, they don't carry guns, right?
No. Don't. We have you have like an armed response teams, stuff like that. That's for you wouldn't ever really see or anything like that. You certainly wouldn't. Your local Bobby wouldn't be walking down the street with a gun in his pocket. I think they get the best they get is a taser. But I think it has this. I don't know. I mean, my only experience in the US is obviously watching films and TV. But am I wrong that like in sort of some smaller communities that police officers actually have a bit of respect sometimes, almost a local hero status, whereas where we are, I think the police, they've got a lot to deal with, and I totally get that. Sort of like the gang problems are massive now in England, like the county line stuff. But and they're unarmed. They're expected to go into these situations where they don't know what's going to happen. And I hate to say it because I'm not a police officer, but I think that they shy away from possibly responsibility and going into things. And what's just come up at the bottom there, definitely true. There is a lot of racism and misogyny, without a doubt, in the British police force. It's rife. It really is. So I want to respect them. I would love to be able to respect your police. I remember when we grew up, I grew up in a little tiny village, and everyone knew the local PC, and he was a lovely bloke. He'd stop, he'd talk to you. I mean, he get a police car out. It's so much. You get eyeballed for it. I mean, there's a point there where they do they've got to try to repair their image to improve it, I think. But I'm sure it could be said for everywhere.
Yeah, the American police don't really give a shit about their image. They seem to just seem to be double downing on shooting innocent people. Like in Minneapolis, right after the George Floyd things, cops are such fucking morons. They like shot somebody again. Like you would think after such a blatant misapplication of power, right? But no, right? And then like, no. And also, I've said this on other times, but at least in the US, you can, there's an old saying that you can always identify the dumbest people by who the cops are, right? There's a 2000, I believe it's 2001 Supreme Court case where a guy applied to be a police officer. And he took an IQ test and his IQ was, he was above average. And they denied him because of that. And so he thought that was discrimination. So he took it to the Supreme Court, and you can look it up. Nobody has to believe me. They can look it up. And the Supreme Court, the police can deny your entry into the police force based on too high of an IQ. So basically what we have is, in America at least, people with guns and a monopoly on violence who have been selected to be the dumbest group of motherfuckers on the planet. Like literally, like you're selected to be dumb. And then there's numerous psychological studies that show that as IQ goes up, prejudice goes down, and namely as intelligence goes down, prejudice goes up. So now you have a perfect confluence of selecting for people who are going to be racist, prejudicial assholes. I mean, I don't mean to get on my high horse here too much, but I mean, I'm a white guy and I have never had a positive experience with a cop, ever. And I grew up poor and I've had plenty of interactions, and they've all been fucking pieces of shit in my opinion. Like when I was a boy, we didn't have air conditioning. The place where we lived didn't put air conditioning in. And so during the summers, like I would stay up at night, right? Because it was hot. Like me and my mother would stay up at night because it was hot as fuck. And so we witnessed behind us a car getting broken into. So we called, the cops to come out. And so we go to, give our statement, and the cop goes, well, I'm not even going to ask why you're up this late. And my mom goes, good, it's none of your fucking business. But that's what I'm talking about, right? Like, it's just like the kind of talking down to you because and this is how they treat me as a white person. Like, I can't imagine how they treat like a black person. Fuck them. Me, I have zero respect for anybody who has a monopoly on violence, right? And that's what it is, right? Like you and I can't just walk around with guns and shoot people. They can, and they get away with it all the time. Obviously, I mean, I'm sort of saying things that are obvious here, but this is the problem with them having a monopoly on violence.
It is. I mean, this idea is very idealist, but I've fought this for a long time, not just for the police, but positions of power like prison guards or prison wardens as well as obviously the guards themselves. But any position of power, that somebody wants that job should not be given to that person because you want the power. I mean, this is totally something that would never happen, and it probably carries its own problems in society anyway. But I can't understand why we can't look at things like once kids are getting to a certain age in school, you've obviously profiling what their strengths, weaknesses are, the types of characters they are, and this is where, rather than we get to career phase towards the end, and they turn around and say, "Oh, you're good with your hands. You'd be a good tradesman," something like that. Rather than looking at these sort of the generic sort of jobs they'll push you into, office jobs, etc., university, I think this is where they should turn around and say, "Look, you've got a very good head for the police, something like this. We're going to give you a university education, and at the end of it, you will start at that level in the police service." So the people are being asked to do it on their strengths rather than people asking to do it for their own selfish benefit and needs. Not at all saying that everyone in the police service goes in for power and corruption, but unfortunately it does happen too often, as we know, we can see.
Yeah, so this is what I would propose is to recognize that, and this is fundamentally like a political anarchist position, is you're always going to have bullies, strong men. The point is not to get rid of them, but to diffuse their power, right? And not solidify it. So there's not a perfect, but like a solution. There's an alternative to police. Is you think about how little we need police. Just think about it, right? When most problems arise, if you're in a bar drinking and you cause a problem, what happens? The bouncer throws you out, right? So why my proposal for, instead of having police, treating security like insurance, right? Like car insurance. And then there would be a vested financial interest on who you hire to solve whatever thing, right? If there's a dispute, you don't call the cop who is not going to care about you if you're poor, right? They're only going to care about property rights, but they have a vested interest if they want to keep your business to get to the bottom of it. So that's what I would say. And then that way you don't have these, with the police now, then working with, you have a relationship with the prosecutor where, and Cody can chime in at any time because he knows way more about this than I do, but prosecutors have a hard time prosecuting cops because they rely upon cops for information, right? So it's a conflict of interest right there. But yeah, I mean, anybody who wants power, I think you're right, shouldn't have it, right? It's the kind of people who are like hall monitors in school, right? I don't know if any of you had hall monitors, right? That were like shaking you down. And it's like, fuck out of here. Like those are the kind of people, like, and as Joel said, I think Joel put something up. He said also the dumbest people are politicians. Yeah. I mean, he said UK politicians, but fucking hell, look at some of ours. Good Lord. Some of our politicians. I'm sure, Steve, oh no, you're in Canada, but I'm sure you follow some of the dumb assholes down here.
That element's here too, that kind of fascist evangelicals who, like I said, policy made by recursively watching Fox News. In regard to policing here, and I've heard it said, I think I'm from a small town. I just think they're, what do you want your police to be? Like in the US, they've evolved into a paramilitary.
Yeah.
Some places. And here.
Yeah, they have tanks and grenade launchers. Yeah.
Yeah. And here, I mean, I think given, for example, the fentanyl and meth on the streets and stuff like that, but they're spread. Police are spread too thin, so the policing we get is often a mile wide and an inch deep. And I see some move to reform it in hiring. For example, where I'm from, they have one psychiatric nurse on staff. So when you phone and you need a wellness check, and I mean, a lot of really negative ending in shooting interactions with law enforcement involve people going through some kind of, neurological, psychological trauma or event. And I would think, you can spend your money one of two ways. You can start arming and, again, go the paramilitary route, which I think is manifested doesn't work, or hire more mental health professionals and try and diffuse things before they end in gunfire and the 6 o'clock news. And again, what we ask of our police here is that they be too many things. So what do you want? Do you want a social worker? Do you want a mental health professional? Do you want a bouncer in body armor with a sidearm? And it's increasingly, I don't want to tell you, it's very expensive to make a paramilitary of your police. You can hire social workers here. I'm not disparaging social workers. We need more of them and more mental health professionals, but that's about half the cost of a police officer. So I'm a proponent of doing it that way. Again, moving some of the drug issues, move that into the healthcare system. Have diversion and stuff like that. You stop a lot of those problems before they end in violent conflict. Other than that, you have so few police and they have so little time that by the time they arrive, it's going to be a violent conflict. They're called there for that kind of iron-fisted enforcement because things have already kind of gotten out of hand. Again, I have my interactions with police have not been too bad. And I know guys in law enforcement, none of them got into it, again, thinking they were bouncers with a sidearm, but within 5 or 10 years, they're pretty jaded. And I don't mind telling you, a place like Lethbridge, and a retired police officer told me, he said, if you're a uniformed officer here where I am, he said 90% of your job is breaking up bar fights at 2 a.m. and domestic disputes at 3 a.m. He said, you're going to have a lot of puke on your shoes, but again, this is a small little corner of the world. And I grew up in even a smaller place. I think the place I grew up was 380 people. We actually didn't have any cops. The RCMP had to come in from a town over,
Yeah, I mean, as far as like a lot of the things that are illegal, like drugs shouldn't even, like no drug should be illegal, right? Like imagine the stupidity. A grown human being telling another grown human being what they can and cannot put in their body.
Yeah. Move it into
stupid.
Health.
Go fuck yourself, Like if I want to drink bleach, it's my fucking body, right? If we own nothing, we own our skin, and we should be able to do anything we want with it. If I want to cut my leg off, I should be able to do that, right?
Drink that bleach and never worry about COVID. Yep. But anyway, I know what you're saying. Yeah, exactly.
That's a Donald Trump jab for all those who don't know, because that's what Donald Trump said at one time. Yeah, just drink bleach.
Drink bleach. I wouldn't advise drinking bleach. I've never done that. But yeah, our again, policing in North America, more so in the States. When I cross the border, I live within an hour of the U.S. border. I can go anytime, but it's adversarial. Like the cops are coming to kick ass. Like they don't want to hear your story, and sometimes it's important to hear those stories. It's like everybody you see, every street level drug addict, every encampment where there's some kind of violence or somebody got pepper sprayed or that, like it's probably easier and cheaper to solve that proactively by spending a little bit of money on healthcare and mental health care than it is to bring in guys in a mine resistant armored patrol vehicle with AR-15s and a water cannon. Just even from, if you want to appeal to let's have cheaper law enforcement, well, that's how you would do it.
Well, I mean, and the thing is like, I think that part of the reason why they're so adversarial is because they're bored. Because crime statistics, if you look at them, it's steadily decreased since the 90s, right? Like there's virtually no, 70s and 80s were pretty bad, and then the 90s declining, right? You can just look up the Bureau of Crime Statistics and you see sometimes, I think during like the first like 2020, there was a little bit of a spike because of COVID. There was something about that. But we're relatively safe. You don't need so many. So even if you can make the argument you need cops, you don't need them. So I think a lot of these guys are like, I'm going to go in there ready to rock and roll. And then they're like, oh yeah, there's like nothing for me to do. I mean, I knew a guy and he went to Miami. He was an adrenaline junkie. He wanted to be like a SWAT team guy, you know, but a lot of these people, I think they get in and they're bored. So yeah, they're adversarial. They're looking for a fight because there's not much happening. Like, as much as you see on the news, the statistics don't bear it out. We're relatively safe compared to the 70s and 80s, you know? But no, I've had the same thing where cops are adversarial. Like a couple of years ago, I've told this story. I was walking down the street and I had my headphones on and a cop came up to me and he's like, take the headphones off. What do you want? He's like, have you seen this person? And I go, nope. And then I was just going to walk away. And he's like, I'm talking to you. And I go, guy, am I under arrest? He goes, no. And then I can go wherever the fuck I want. Either arrest me and then get me a lawyer or go fuck yourself. And then I walked away. And he didn't do anything. But that's actually the best piece of advice. The best for any listener out here, every interaction you have with a cop, lawyer up. You ask for that lawyer. That's why it's so funny when you watch these like crime shows or these like true crime shows. Every cop, their worst fear is a lawyer being brought in. Yeah, because then you can't lie. Then you can't manipulate, which is what cops do all the time. It's legal for them to lie. Even on the stand, there's a whole notion called test-a-lying. So the least reliable witness is a cop who will, because cops will regularly lie for the prosecution. And everybody with such to the degree that there's a term called test-a-lying. So the minute a cop says something, I immediately think, oh, it's bullshit, because it probably is. So if people wonder why I don't like cops, maybe it's because you can murder people with impunity, you can lie with impunity, you can brutalize people with impunity. Austin can attest to the fact that in Arizona, he's had to deal with these fucking people harassing him, trying to give water to homeless people. Imagine being such a motherfucking piece of shit that your biggest concern in life is helping another person. Shaking down somebody like Austin, trying to give water to homeless people. And Austin has to deal with these fucking people, these cops. That's the American police that we have. And that's not even counting the fact that a lot of these fucking morons have tanks and grenade launchers. And that's discounting civil forfeiture laws, where they can legally steal from you, where they pull you over and they think maybe perhaps some of your property might have been used in the commission of the crime. They can confiscate it.
Yeah, that's how should I put it? I've heard about that. I've heard about some of these rural jurisdictions where police are paid a commission on writing traffic tickets, for example. That's just nuts.
Yeah.
You know, pay your cops and keep them clean, and then you know you got to police your cops. I think I would not say that there's not any bad apples here, but we don't have those same kind of civil forfeiture laws. No cop is paid a commission on writing tickets, stuff like that. I think individually our police tend to be fairly well trained. For example, the RCMP, I mentioned that earlier. You have to be bilingual, have a university degree. They're trying to recruit. From when you talked about intelligence there, they're trying to recruit smarter people to be better officers. And the question is, how do you fund it and what should you be funding here anyways? Should we be funding a paramilitary? Well, nobody really wants that. How do we approach these problems? Relatively compared to a paramilitary, it's a modest investment in mental health, safe consumption, diversion, and I know times are tough all over, but if it matters, find the money and do it. Other than that, you wind up with this kind of adversarial. You got this army in blue, throwing their weight around because they're told to or think that they should. And by the way, I say this: there's people up here who would think about homeless people where I'm from and stuff like that. It would be like shoot them all, and I'm like, well, no, you haven't walked a mile in those shoes. You don't know where those people come from. Nobody ever was born to be, addicted on the streets and uncared for. Nobody was born for that. The idea that they were disposable, that's wrong. So, how do we? You have to recognize in these things you can't impose 30 days of rehab. Probably doesn't fix anybody except for 30 days. But how do you, manage that process so that eventually, all of us are better off for it. But
yeah,
I'd say mental health and buy my book. But,
buy everybody's book here. Yeah, I mean, Austin, James, Steve. I mean, and then Neda. Neda, you actually do have stuff out. You do. You've edited a couple anthologies. I remember that. So check out Neda's stuff. And also, Neda does great. I hope I'm not talking out of line saying this, but Neda does outstanding author interviews. Outstanding. She just recently profiled Manny. And so I think, again, Neda can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to speak on her behalf, but I believe, if anybody's down for an author interview, she's wonderful. She's always done us really well and our authors really well. So, do you want to chime in, Neda?
I would love to, but I think my internet is a problem. It's a little bit problematic here. Why?
Do what?
Yeah, I think nobody can hear me properly. I have issues with the internet. So if you hear me, yes, I do interview with authors, and you can contact me if you want. Steve, I didn't interview you, so maybe with you.
Yeah, no, I would love to be interviewed.
Yeah, so there we go. Anyway, we're like way over the time. So,
this is a good group. This is a great group. Like this was really, I very much appreciated Sebastian and Cody having me on, and James, Austin, and Neda. This was good.
Hey, you know what? The pleasure is ours. I mean, the way Cody and I see it, and I hope I can speak on Cody's behalf and he can jump in, but it's kind of a jungle out there, right? And, you've got your social media clicks, right? And Cody and I, we ain't part of their fucking clicks. And so you just got to go out there and grab it, So whatever we can do. And the people that me and Cody get are just, I mean, we see it right here, and you can watch the previous episode. Is just awesome people. We'll have to figure out who we'll have for June, but yeah, I know it's our honor that we're able to do what we do, because we can only do what we do because of all of you, right? Like, we would be nothing without the authors and the readers, right? We would be nothing. It's entirely dependent on those two factors. So thank you all for being on. Thank you all for being on and sharing your work. Cody, do you want to say something before I drone on about the Trevor Project stuff?
Yeah, just to I guess kind of piggyback on what you said. Yeah, I appreciate everybody coming on. So this is our second episode of doing this live event. So it's got some good feedback so far. So we're going to keep doing it. So I guess we'll try to keep it the last part of every month probably. So
yeah, probably the last part of every month, and we'll cycle through our author catalog, right? I think the plan is kind of 2 people from Outcast, 2 people from Anxiety, and then we'll just come back around, right? If we run out of people, we'll just cycle back around and do it again. So yeah, I'll end with that and then just say we've got the Mirrors Reflecting Shadows anthology. That's got 33 pieces, right, Cody?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so it's got a piece by Steve. I got a piece in there. Cody's got a piece in there, and then just it sort of runs the gamut, right? It runs the gamut on. We got some horror stuff. We've got some more literary stuff, some transgressive fiction stuff. I don't know what you classify my piece as, other than goddamn depressing. At least that's if I can just, I hope Barb doesn't mind me saying this, but I sent it to Barb and I said, just read this at home, because if it fucks you up like it did me, and she made the mistake of reading it on the train, and she goes, "Oh, it was not a good place to read." I go, "I told you, it's a short piece. I don't mean to draw on about my own work, but it's a short piece, but it just took, once you read it, you'll be like, oh, fuck." And yeah, it laid me out for a bit, but a lot of the pieces are just outstanding. I mean, and like I said, we had well over 600 pieces that the RF ladies graciously had to sift through and find. And, so for anybody who is listening that didn't make the cut, I mean, we only had so many slots, right? And
it's not because it was terrible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't say, I don't know if the person wants me to say his real name, but the anthology was only made possible because of a guy with the handle Mythic Picnic. And the story behind that is he sent us something. We passed on it. He was very happy with the job that Cody and I did with the Planned Parenthood anthology. And he was very generous and said, if you want to do another anthology, I will chip in. And he chipped in a sizable chunk so that we could pay folks this time. And so big shout out to the RF ladies for getting the pieces, editing them, getting them to Cody and us, but also big shout out to Mythic Picnic, all one word, at twitter.com, because without his generous support, we wouldn't be able to do this. Or if we did, it would be a lot harder. So we should come up with a good outro, Cody, because then I'm just like, all right, well, that's it. But Cody, you usually have some good one-liners to send us all off on our merry way.
Well, let me see. I can read something from Substack recently, I guess.
Oh yeah, and if you're not subscribed to Cody's Substack, get on that, because he's great. It's just his Substack is great. So yeah, read something from your Substack. It's going to be great.
All right, I'll end with the last line I used, which is, I have a fear that if I start to cry, I'll never stop.
There you go. All right. So thank you, James, Austin, Neda, and Steve, for being a part of this. It was a pleasure having you on. Yep. And we'll see you in the group chat. So, yep. And to all the listeners, thank you for bearing with us for the whole, if you made it this far into the 2-hour mark, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And thanks for Joel for chiming in your questions. He also made comments disparaging evangelicals, which
He's much appreciated.
I will second that. I'll second that. So him being a former or maybe current, but yeah, we got to get Joe on one of these times because he's an amazing dude. But all right, with that, thank you to all of you, and
yeah, till next time.
Till next time, I guess. All right, bye.
Have a good night.
Thanks again, guys.